Hi, this is Kathi Quinn with Floriani. Floriani is a division of R&K Distributing, and I want to welcome you to this week's Project of the Week. Well, I've had a great week. I was up in Vacaville, California at ABS Sewing, and I got some great questions. So I thought I would answer. It's a fairly basic lesson this week, but I realized how many people did not quite understand this. So we're going to go through and look at how to set up your house. Now, in software, and it doesn't matter what software it is, there are rules for the house. And if you think of your computer as the house, there's a set of house rules, but there's a different set of rules for the kitchen or the bathroom or the bedroom. So that's where we come in, where we've got Floriani Total Control U. We might have Microsoft Office. Those are different rooms, but the basic house rules remain the same. But we want to look at some specific house rules today that are just pertain to our Floriani Total Control U. Now I'm going to come up and you'll notice across the top we've got headings. Now under tools, and tools is what we're going to look at specifically today, because I realized a lot of my ladies did not really understand how to set up the rules for this program. So I'm going to left mouse click on the tools button and I'm going to come down to preferences. Now we've talked about these before in the past, but I really want to go through these tabs and kind of make you understand how you can set up your house to work the best for you, because we're all different. We all use our software for different functions. Now the first thing we want to look at is formats. Now you'll notice under formats we've got a few little boxes. We have the default style. It's asking us what machine do we basically use, hoop bracket location, and do we want to color match on loading, and what thread do we want to use to do that with. Now first, under formats, now default style means when I bring up a page, a new piece of paper, it's going to follow the rules for normal style. Now I could pick out here, we have Save to Sew, which is an amazing, amazing feature. But if I knew that I was going to digitize on PK Knit, I was going to work with something, I could have picked PK Knit now. Doesn't make any sense to, since Save to Sew is going to take care of us in the end. So I leave this on normal. For me, that's fine. Now if I was going to do a whole bunch of stuff for a PK Knit quilt, like we make quilts with PK Knit, I might want to set up that template to work with that day with all the designs I was working with. Now the next thing is my machine format. Now most of us anymore have more than one brand of machine. And that's one of the great things about Floriani is we love everybody. We're machine agnostics. All the top of the line machines have something awesome to bring to the table, but we all have what we use the most. Now right now in my life, that would be a PES format. Now why is it important that I'm picking that? Well, because then when I go to hoops and stuff, it's automatically going to look at that first instead of Janome hoops. Now hoop bracket location, well, on the Destiny, the Dream, it's on the left. Now if I was using my 10 needle, I would do top, right, bottom, would figure it out. Now here's something that's important to me. Color match on loading. Now this means any design I bring in from anywhere, no matter whose threads it was digitized in originally. So if I buy a design from a designer that uses Robinson Anton, if I just loaded that, it would come in with Robinson Anton colors. Well, I happen to love Floriani, and I assume everybody loves beautiful Floriani thread. So I would come in here and I would tell it that Kathi likes Floriani poly. Now notice in my list though here, I want you to notice a couple things. I also have in here, I don't know if I can use my drawing tool at the same time. I can't. Okay, see how I have Kathy's favorite, Kathy's basic, Kathy's top drawer. These are thread charts I have created for myself that fit a specific pattern. For instance, if you have an inventory of Floriani thread and you just want the colors to match to the closest match in what you specifically own, you could go ahead and go into your tools and create a threads chart. And you could create a thread chart with just the threads you own and name it My Floriani Threads. You could have picked that and told it to color match on loading. Then anytime your designs load, they're going to match to only the colors you own. Now, I'm very blessed that I own all the Floriani colors. So I'm going to go to Floriani Poly because I have them. Now I'm going to say, I'm not going to say okay yet, but now anytime I load a design, it's going to match to Floriani Poly. Now you may not use Floriani. You might use Hemingworth. You might use Isacord. You might use the Janome palette, the Jenny Haskins thread. We have them all in here for you. So you can pick your thread palette. You've got your Viking palette. You've got them all. So pick the palette that you use all the time so it will load. Now here's another thing about creating your own thread chart. What if I've got some Floriani colors, I have some Isacord, I have some Robinson Anton. I could customize that chart with every thread I owned and let it match to them. So I might match my black to Floriani Poly, but I might match a peach to my Robinson Anton. So you get the idea there. Now let's move on over to environment. Now the environment, now units, imperial is our US measurement or metric. Now you can set it here. You can also set it very easily by my right mouse clicking on our ruler bar. Now autosave, this is always nice to have. Autosave is a good thing. So if you're working on designs, that way if the power goes out, your computer just gets crazy, the program freezes because it feels like it. You could have saved in the last minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. That's a personal choice. I usually do about 5 minutes unless I'm working on something really serious. Then I might have 1 minute because I might want to make sure it keeps up with me as fast as I can go. MS Paint, editing program, that's fine. You could put in any you have. Of course, my language is English, and I can tell it to show a warning for large satins or not. So, and that means, let me explain this before I just pass it off. Walter has taught us that a satin stitch on a knit can never be any larger than 7 millimeters, any wider. If it's wider, it's going to cause your knit to pull and gap and have problems. Now, if I was stitching on a heavy denim, a canvas, some really super stable fabric, I could even go maybe 10 millimeters. But if you have this and you enlarge a design, if you have this selected and you enlarge a design bigger, it's going to warn you, hey, your satin stitches are a little bit long. You might want to change those. You might want to look at making those a split satin, make it a fill. Certainly if it's a lot larger, you're going to make it a fill. So you can decide on that. Now view is your highlight selection. Now when you load Floriani software, it picks kind of a pale blue to highlight everything. Well, I use blues in my designs, but I'm not real fond of garish pink. I'm not a pink girl. So by picking pink, if I highlight something, I can tell very easily that's what's been highlighted. If you don't see a color here that works for you, you go to more and you can pick any color out of here to be your highlight color. Personal preferences again. Now let's go to grid. Now right now my grid is set at 1/4 inch height and width. I can change these however I want them. Now I'm telling it that my minor grid, which is my little 1/4 inch grid here, I want that in gray. Now I can make it any color I want. Again, you're in total control with our software. Now my grid major is I'm saying every so many lines. So if I wanted my grid major every inch, I would say every 4 lines, since at this time I've got my minor grid at every 1/4 of an inch. So if I got this, then that would mean these big lines, I would see them on every inch. So you've got a whole lot of flexibility setting up this grid, and it's really nice if you're working with, let's say, a quilt block, but you want to be able to see the 1/4 of an inch seam around it. Well, if these are majors and these are minors, it would make it very easy. Now, I have a choice to show my grid as dashed lines, as dots, or solid lines, personal preference. Now here's one that's a little tricky. This is snap to grid. This is fantastic if you're working with straight lines. If you're doing a quilt block, if you're doing the diagonals, if you're doing stuff like that, that means it's going to find an intersection and it's going to snap to it. So it's going to keep everything very taut and straight. But if you forget that this is your setting, you can't figure out why when you click to put down a control point, it jumps or it moves outside where you thought it should. So I never pick this in my preferences. I turn it on and off as I need it off the ruler bar so that I won't forget that it's there and frustrate myself, because you can frustrate yourself for half an hour before you figure it out. So this is where I'm going to set my grid for now. Now let's look at auto-based. Now I love the fact you have such control over auto-based. I can add crosshairs, yes or no. Now enter the stitch length for the based. Now let's talk about this a minute. I'm usually going to put auto-based probably, I'm not going to put it at 6. And the reason being, again, Walter has taught us that it takes 7 revolutions of the bobbin to catch that bobbin thread really good. And if you're doing a revolution and you're moving 6 millimeters, that's a 1/4 of an inch, and you're moving, it's really hard to catch that base stitch, get your needle to catch the bobbin. So if you are using a longer base stitch, or on a lot of our home machines, they have a wonderful auto-based feature right on the screen. I highly recommend when you use those, hold on to your top needle thread. Don't hold it real tight, but hold it so that that can get caught and get a good start. So I really usually do mine about 4. Now the next option is great. This is telling you how far do you want to go outside the design. Well, if I'm basting down, let's say I've got a diaper and it's got those 6 layers and I'm going to do a burp cloth. I am going to probably baste a little bit outside my stitching because I'm going to put a grid in eventually anyway. But if I put this, let's say it's 0, I don't want to pick out a bunch of basting. I would put that where actually my design would cover the edge of my basting, and then I wouldn't have to pick that out. But sometimes when you have thicker stuff, you're putting down a quilt block, you want to put something in the middle, you're going to baste outside. So you've got control up to almost 1/2 inch. Remember, think of 4/4 to a dollar when you're thinking of millimeters. So if I'm at 6, I'm at 1/4. If I'm at 12, I'm at 1/2. You get the idea. So you can decide, depending on what your garment is, what your thickness is, what you're doing in your hoop, you can make a decision on how far outside that design you want to baste. And now we have color sort. Now, this is enter the maximum allowable colors overlap per layer by percentage. To explain this, I'm trying to think of a good way to explain this. If I've got a red and a blue, or a white and a blue. Okay, I might not want that white to over color sort too far percentage-wise into that blue because of a shadow effect. So this you kind of look at per layer because of course we've got underlay, we have overlay. You might be doing something where you're stacking 2 or 3 colors like dog fur, something to kind of blend colors. So you might want to decide how much overlap you have. Now remember, if you're using satin stitches, you're going to have a decent amount of overlap because of the pull. But you might not need tons of overlap in the color sort. So that would be all my preferences. So let's go back. We've got Pez normal. I've got English 5 minutes. I've got my view. I want to highlight my selection in pink. I've set my grid up like I wanted. I've done my auto based and my color sort. Now I'm going to say OK. Now notice my grid first off. My purple lines are 1 inch, but I can see my 1/4 of an inch in here. Perfect. If I bring in something to highlight, let's grab a design here, just so you get the thing. And remember, I also told it to match colors on loading to my Floriani. So let me just grab something. Okay, so when I bring this in, we're going to have Floriani colors. It says my style is normal. The machine format I picked with PES. So if I come over here to hoops to pick a hoop, notice my PES hoops come up right away. Now I could change that if I'm working on a Janome or I'm working on my Bernina, or I'm working on the Vikings, so I pick a VIP. I could change these and get the other hoops, but since I'm using the PES the most right now, this is bringing up those hoops. Now, obviously, this isn't the right hoop, so I would go back and say, I need a different hoop. Let's do this hoop. And say, this is what's going to fit. Perfect. So that brought my hoop. Now, if I select, you notice it turns my garish pink. Now let me ungroup and let's just pick a section. So I know without a doubt that garish pink is selected because that was my highlight color. Okay, I'm going to turn off this hoop. Whoops, not my grid, my hoop. I'm going to turn off my hoop. I'm going to select it and I'm going to use my auto based function. So there's my auto based. So we have set that like I wanted my auto based function to go. So setting up your tools to work for you is the easiest way to do it. Oh, and of course, I told it to match to Floriani colors. So we've got all of our environment to set up, and if you set this up to work for you, it makes it so much easier when you're working in your software. Now, I did tell you a couple of things that I don't do in the preferences. Notice I have a ruler bar along the top and along the left-hand side. If I right mouse click on here, notice I can go between metric and USA. I can change my snap to grid. Remember, that's the one that can make you crazy. And I could come, if I needed to do a quick grid setting, that I needed my major or minor grid different, I can do it real fast from here. So these are very easy to get to change any of that. So nothing's in stone, but that sets your program's rules. So I've set the house rules for my embroidery software to make it nice and easy. I've got my autosave going. I've got my match colors on loading. So this is the way to work in here. Now, let's say I don't want to go change major all the time. What if I just want to look at a different thread chart? I can come down to the bottom left-hand corner and click and still see what thread charts are available. I could change it here and bring that same design back in and match it all to anchor colors on that basis for just this design. But then if I close my software, it's still going to default to Floriani for the rest of the time. So you're at your girlfriend's house and all she has is Isacord. So I've changed that to the Isacord palette. Now I would go ahead and reopen this design and it would come in all Isacord colors. But once I shut my program down and I open it back up, it's going to default to Floriani because the house rules are Floriani. So I hope this kind of clears up a little bit of confusion and explains how we can set up our house. Of course, again, you could change your hoop from here, you can change your grids, you can change everything from the face of the program. But if we set up what makes life comfortable for us here, this is the easiest way to do it. And of course, there's Thread Chart Creator. There is an archived video on how to create your own thread chart. Please go through the videos, look at the video lessons and everything. Anytime you want to do any of this, you would go to My Floriani Club. Okay, so we're in the club. Sign in. Once you've signed in, you can start looking at training videos, software lessons. You can look at your Floriani Weekly Club, and you've got those how to create a thread chart in there, how to do these lessons. Come in here and look. If I come in here and look under training videos, and I look under, I went back. Let me go back here one. Touched one too fast. If I go into FTCU, and notice we've got them for all of it. We've got lots of stuff in here for you for training videos. So let's come in here. I could come in these training videos, and if I want to look at how-tos, letterings, you can come in here and you can start looking. What if I want to edit? How do I edit? I can go back. What if I want to do some how-tos in here? Let's look for those thread charts. You know, how do I create my own thread chart? All this stuff is in here. There's your thread chart creator. So if you want to know how to create a thread chart specific to the threads you own, come in here and watch the 10-minute video. We've tried to give you lots and lots of information, easy ways to get around, to do these things. But go through and look at the lessons. If there's something you're not sure of, check and see if there's a lesson on it. There probably is. So I hope you enjoyed this week's Project of the Week. I look forward to seeing you next week.